Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today, Ted, we have Jake Davis of Volley, and we have a lot of really important discussion topics to unpack today.
And Sarah, I know it's a topic near and dear to your heart. Volley is tearing it up in the industry, making great strides. Jake, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thanks a lot, Ted, Sarah, for having me. Excited to be here and a part of this awesome session.
You know, you really are at Volley the number one BDC engine. You power a lot of dealerships, and Sarah and I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. Before we do, next week is the big NADA show. It's in Las Vegas. Jake, will Volley be there?
We'll definitely be there. Volley will be there, as well as myself and Scott and Liza, who you've all seen on the Fix Ops Roundtable before as well.
All right. Well, Sarah and I look forward to spending some time with you in person next week. And let's come back to that, Sarah. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. And I know you have some questions as well to get things started today.
Yes, Jake. So, we're hearing a lot of conversations in the industry around telephony. We've seen so many different advancements with technology. And of course, our smartphones are closer than ever on our person and customers, they're expecting this seamless communication when it comes to the interactions in dealerships. But one of the things that has come up quite a bit has been around spam. And so I want to just kick things off, first, before we get into our conversation in more detail, what are some of the misconceptions that you hear of specifically with spam labels?
Well, it's very clear to us with the data that we see in Volley, and I know Scott will, I'm sure, later this year have more to share in terms of specific numbers relating to texting in particular. But it's very clear to us that calls are still the best way to reach people, and it's important to make sure that your calls are actually reaching your customers. So the dealers are getting hit with spam labels quite a bit, and we do hear of questions and we hear of other things that are said throughout the industry, and it gives people the wrong idea. So the first big misconception that people always assume when it comes to spam labels is that, oh well, we've made a lot of phone calls. Oh yeah, we're hammering the phones. That's why we're coming up as spam, and it's really not just call volume. That they do look at the call volume,
Okay.
they do take that into account, and it might even be a large uh, component of this, but it is not the only thing. And in fact, I've seen numbers that because we can check these numbers for the dealers. I've seen numbers that have made single digit number of phone calls in a month, and those calls
Oh,
were
wow.
labeled as spam.
Still, gee.
So it is not just volume, though. That's what a lot of people assume.
Jake, I'm curious, what have you seen? What are some of the strategies that dealers have tried to use to combat this?
Well, if you want to solve this on your own, first you need to know it's a problem. And a lot of the dealers are being hit with these negative labels, and they don't really have a great, I mean, there's no report that their click to call is going to give them, or their desk phone doesn't tell them if they come up as spam.
Yeah.
So if you want to know with certainty, uh, you need to be doing regular test calls to each of the big carriers because they all label independently.
Oh,
Uh, and just because you're labeled on Verizon doesn't mean you're labeled on T-Mobile and vice versa. So you need to be doing regular test calls from all of your phone numbers to each of the carriers, and really, because the algorithms can change on a dime, uh, I mean, you at least need to be checking them multiple times a week, if not every day, to know how bad your numbers are doing. But with that said, once you know you have a problem, whether you've done the testing or you've heard about it from customers or something, the big one that comes up a lot is number swapping. We hear all the time where dealers and vendors try to get around this problem by number swapping. They know that a number
mm,
is coming up as spam or fraud, and they oh, that number's no good, so we need to switch it out. And this is a really imperfect strategy, to say the least. The carriers do not know who owns a phone number. You might think, oh, well, I pay my phone bill, or I pay, this vendor for this click to call, or what have you. And so therefore, it's known that this is my phone number, but that's really not the case. All Verizon, for example, knows is this 10-digit phone number hit our network, 70 times today. And how does that compare to yesterday? How does that compare to last Wednesday? And for example, so uh, because they're just looking at the calling habits, well, there's no guarantee that number you swap to is going to be clean to begin with. But even if it is, you're just going to be labeled again in a couple of weeks because they're solely looking at the calling habits. So it's really um,
Well,
at best a band aid, and at worst, you might be switching to a number with an even worse calling reputation because there's no such thing as a new phone number. And at this point, when you rotate a number within all these software tools, they're just pulling from a pool of numbers that has surely already been used.
Jake, this is so interesting because, again, our dealers that are listening today, this may not be a top of mind conversation when it comes to, your everyday business operations, but this is the first instance that a customer may be experiencing when, they bring their car in for service, and now that service advisor is calling the customer back with a status update, and you're not able to make that connection because, again, these pieces, get labeled as spam. So,
yeah.
you know, from the perspective of, you just walked us through some pieces that were important, regarding number swapping, and the importance of staying on top of this and making some of these test calls. But I want to go back a step for a second, and just ask the question, why? So if it's not the call volume, is it things like marketing campaigns, or are there other triggers that cause these numbers to get flagged as spam?
Hmm.
That's a great question, and I do have one other strategy that I've seen before that we'll touch on, but that's a great question. So the why is it's kind of complicated too, and there's a lot of regulatory red tape involved as well. Uh,
Okay.
there's various know your customer laws. There's the Traced Act. There's been various regulations like Stir Shaken and other things. Stir Shaken is a piece of regulations that's supposed to it was designed to stop number spoofing, but there's components to all of these things,
Okay.
and though Stir Shaken isn't really related to it was just a for instance, it's not really related to spam labeling, but there's the carriers have been determined by the FCC to not have an obligation to connect your calls with your customers. So
Hmm.
you as a business might think, oh yeah, I calling Sarah to schedule a service appointment. I have every right to call her, and you do. You can call her, but Verizon's obligation is to protect Sarah from unwanted communication, and that is the mindset that they are using when they are determining how they want to let these calls go through. So what they've done is they've deployed these algorithms onto their networks, and
Okay.
the carriers themselves don't actually run they've each hired an exclusive company. They have an exclusive partner who manages the algorithms on their networks, and it's kind of funny as a quick tangent. I'd heard a few years ago that one of the cellular companies, you can go into a store and buy a cell phone. That those stores were being branded as spam on that network because just different departments, different companies coming together. So they really
Hmm.
don't know who own these numbers, but anyway, so they have these algorithms and they're looking at everything relating to your calling history. They are looking at how many calls you're making, but they're also looking at how long are the calls, how many people are you connecting with, are you leaving voicemails, and how does that compare to
Hmm.
the history of data that we have for all of these phone numbers. And as the greatest of why is, well, they don't make it they don't want actual scammers to be able to get around the algorithm, so they don't make them public, but we do know some of the things they're looking at, like I already said. And then the other component is negative consumer feedback. I know AT&T in particular really relies on consumers complaining to the carrier about negative calls from this number. So that's something that we see a lot of, after we have worked with a dealer and after we have, this number, um, should be clean. Well, the carriers always withhold a right to label a number, and if you have a lot of customers in a row complain to the carrier about a number, they're going to throw a label on it. So um, really, really, a lot of it goes into the algorithms more than volume.
Jake, coming back to this, how does being labeled as spam, how does that actually affect, and does it affect connection rates?
Well, I think just from a practical sense, I mean,
Yeah.
Ted, are you answering a call if it comes up as spam?
No.
No. Uh,
No.
Me, I know that we can help dealers with this, so I know that legitimate calls can be coming up as spam. So I do answer
Yeah.
more than most. I still don't answer all of them if they say spam, and it's really striking. So we see
Mm.
a 38% decrease in connection rate if a number is labeled as spam,
Wow.
and for honestly, I'm surprised it's not even lower, right? I mean, people don't answer spam calls, but
Right.
38% decrease if you're labeled as spam.
And Jake, this is fascinating because again, what you're talking about in this scenario, these are legitimate again with a dealership calling out. They're proactively they're trying to really do the customer a favor, either notify them of a recall or go ahead and schedule a service appointment because the vehicle's alerted the dealership that the
Mm.
service is now needed because the maintenance light is on. These are all legitimate reasons for someone to be picking up the phone and calling their customer. But then, this phone number now is coming across and it says, potential spam. So the customer goes, "Oh no, I'm not answering that." And I know you have the ability with Volley to check the number's health. So what do you see for people before you have worked with them on this? And then what percentage of numbers are being labeled?
It is. You're totally right. The dealers have every right. They're making calls that people want. They're not making unwanted calls. I know we're fixed ops roundtable. We're talking about service today. I mean, even sales, right? You submit a fresh web lead. You want a call. That's a truly wanted call. So um, some of the data around once this is solved, how do the numbers stay clean after the fact? Because the carriers always withhold a right to label a number. The dealers, once it is all solved the right way, and we'll talk about that. I know what actually needs to be taken. The carriers recognize that the dealers are making good calls and they do keep them clean, a lot higher than than other industries. So some of the partners we have that work on this, they do work outside of auto, and I
Yeah.
do hear that some of
Yeah.
these other industries are pretty bad. But anyway, so we can certainly check the phone numbers, and we can check them before we ever work with you and see if they're coming up as spam. And we see, I guess one other thing to add on this is that the carriers all label independently. So if you give me a list of 20 phone numbers that you want me to check, that's actually 60 potential spam tags because
Hmm.
Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile all label independently. And
Wow.
those are the big three carriers. Those are the ones we're talking about today. All of the other smaller carriers, the ones who do spam labeling, they use the big three's algorithms. So that's why just focusing on the big three. But so that's 60 potential checks. And what we typically see is that of those 60, if I'm given a random assortment of number, about a third of those possible checks are tagged as spam. So, if you give me a list of 20 if you give me a list of 25 numbers, that's 75 possible spam tags.
Okay.
I'm going to
Wow.
expect to see about 25 to 30
Oh,
spam
really?
tags
Wow.
when I check this. But I also think it's important to say that for whatever reason, it does seem to be isolated by carrier too.
Okay.
So, a dealer that I run, they might have a big problem on Verizon, but AT&T, they're pretty solid, or vice versa. So what we actually see is upwards of 75% of the phone numbers are often have one label, often isolated to one of the carriers. So it is pretty bad when you take a big sample size of the phone numbers that the dealers give us.
I have a follow-up, Jake, and
Mhm.
just I'm curious, once a number so actually 2 questions. Number 1, once a number is labeled as spam, does it carry that mark with it forever? Does it wear off after a certain time? And second, how can this actually be solved?
So great questions. The algorithms are always running and they're always fluctuating, and this is another thing that makes it hard to solve for the dealers. You know, when we run this check for them, it's just a moment in time. So just because you're
Mm,
you're tagged today on
okay.
Verizon doesn't mean you're going to be tagged tomorrow on
Oh, wow.
Verizon. They are
Okay.
always running these algorithms. They're always listening, watching the calling history and the calling habits.
Interesting.
And now it is, yes, it is not super likely that you're going to be flagged, and then with nothing changing, it's going to be uh, it's going to be solved. It's going to be it's going to be label free the next day. But it does happen. It does make it hard to diagnose, and that's why back to the well, how do you know that you have this problem? You do need to be doing regular test calls. One of the things we hear all the time is, oh, this customer said I came up as spam. Well, you were this morning, you're not now for whatever reason, and then you are again tomorrow.
Huh.
So it is pretty tough. Of course, it can go away on its own if you have calling habits that fit what the carriers are looking for more, or if you start to get less consumers complaining to the carriers. But it is pretty tough. And there is theoretically a recourse for a business to get in touch with the carriers to fight these labels. It's very hard. Frankly, there's frankly, you need to identify which store, which phone number, which carriers have flagged the phone number, and you need to then engage with each of the carriers and their analytics provider. The company that is the one doing the labeling. It's pretty tough to get get a hold of these. One of the misconceptions we see is there's a website called the freecallerregistry.com, and people, right? I mean, frankly, rightfully assume that if I submit to this database, it's going to keep the numbers clean. Uh, it really doesn't. It's more of a lead gen source for the analytics providers, though. They will say, right on the front page there that it doesn't replace a call reputation monitoring service. It doesn't. We don't guarantee recourse. So even if it does, even if these free things that you can submit to do temporarily solve the problem, there, which it doesn't often, there's no reporting. There's no way to see this. So if you actually want to solve this, you either need to go to the carriers directly, or you need to partner with someone who has done that partnership and that integration. And take Volley for example. We have partnered with each of the carriers, and we can go to them and we say, hey, Jim's Ford, for example, is a legitimate business. Here's all of their legal information, and because of the agreements, they know it's totally in compliance with the Know Your Customer laws. We give them the list of phone numbers, and then when they see that number come up, they usually let the call go through without labels. Like I said, the carriers always reserve the right, which is why I would never partner with someone on this who doesn't have a path to remediation of issues that come up. But that is really what you need to be doing. I would look for someone who can offer call reputation monitoring services if you don't want to go to the carriers directly, which I know is frankly even more expensive than partnering with someone.
Well, Jake, this is such an important topic for our audience today listening. I mean, again, this is the communication point that customers expect, and so just in final thoughts, as we're preparing for the rest of 2026, as our audience is listening today, and maybe Ted making plans to come to NADA and
Next
to
week,
look
yeah.
at
Mhm.
solutions to really help their dealership. First, Jake, just really short. I see sometimes phone numbers come across that aren't in my contact list. that show the name of the company. Like Sarah Vantine Motors would
Mhm.
be on the caller ID instead of just the blank phone number. So what solutions are out there for dealerships that are looking for something with maybe more branding or that specific caller ID? And then what can we expect to see when we're out at NADA?
Well, I'll take those one at a time. So the first point about caller ID, uh, there is older technology relating to caller ID called CNAM, and whenever you sign up for a new phone number, they're going to set this CNAM information that stands for caller name, and depending on the customer's cell phone plan, some of the carriers are bundling it now, but about 25 to 30% of consumers get this data where you call me, I've never heard of you, it's going to ring through. About 25% of Americans have a cell phone plan that gets them that data. For the most part, what we're looking to solve here is removing that negative label and having it come up as just a trusted phone number, right? But about 25% of people do get caller ID information baked into their cell phone plan. That's totally free if you're having, and it's through your phone provider. There are services, I'd call them branded calling services, where you can overwrite the CNAM, and as long as you're not coming up as a negative label, like a spam or something, you can put your name. Sometimes, depending on the phone, you could have a reason for calling or something like that as well. And in general, honestly, I think the jury's still out in terms of how much it actually helps contact rates for the dealers. I know that there are industries where it certainly helps. I've also historically thought it was a little expensive for what I'm not so sure about the data on it. With that said, the costs are coming down. There's some newer technologies behind it where you can even get a logo on certain phones and certain calls. So heading into 2026, if it were me, I would I'd maybe give it a shot. We at Volley, we could help you with that. We could do it for your Volley calls, and you could give it a shot on T-Mobile and Verizon. It is. I think the jury's still out on it, on how much it actually helps, though.
I have a spam call coming in right now. I'm not going to take it.
Well, and imagine if that was your dealer trying to schedule you for service.
Right? Think
Right.
about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Jake again. So it lots of great information to share. If our dealer audience is coming to NADA, or if if they want to learn more about what Volley has in upcoming innovations and how your technology can help support their telephony and their BDC departments and these outgoing communications that our customers desperately need, what can you share with us?
Yeah. Well, of course, via NADA, we're gonna, you can stop by to see any of the products we have. You can look at the dealer identity to help you with the spam if you're struggling with that. You can look at
Okay.
Volley's BDC tool, and our Pulse
You don't know.
as well. You can also stop by the booth relating to spam labels. For the dealer identity, if you want us to check your numbers, even if we have no prior history with you, we can certainly do that at NADA. And you can also reach out to me. Here, my phone number and email are,
See
are
that.
on
Yeah.
the show here. So
That's your cell phone number on the bottom there?
that's my cell phone. Like I said, I do pick up if it says spam, so feel free to call me, and and we can certainly or send me an email, and we can certainly set that up for you. We're gonna have a great team at NADA. We're gonna have a couple of very exciting announcements to share. So we hope to see you all at the booth.
All right, everybody, put Volley on your short list next week. Las Vegas NADA show. Sarah and I will be there. Jake Davis, Scott Davis, the team, a big part of what we do at the Fixed Ops Roundtable and of the industry. They'll be in the West Hall, NADA booth 2409W. Make it your plan to visit with them. I know Sarah and I will see Jake and doing some interviews out there. So, Jake, look forward to seeing you in person in real life. Congratulations on all the success you're having at Volley, and keep up the great work and continue to move our industry and our great dealers forward.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ted. Thanks, Sarah, for having me, and hope you both have a fantastic day. We'll see you guys next week.
Jake Davis, everybody, from Volley, the #1 BDC engine, here with us today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.